they're the two times I thought I've come close to maybe leaving the planet. And I told myself I just have to not look down, don't look up, just look straight ahead and just do one rung at a time.
Welcome to the Frequency Files. Thanks for joining us as we explore the vibrations, forms, and creations and mechanisms behind them that inform the nature of existence. Ian, it's amazing to have you back. There's so much to dive into. You have such a depth and breadth of experience in all that you do and in being the founder of Australian Bushflower Essences. In our first conversation, we explored the origins of the range, of your story, and a little bit about the various applications and different ways that people are using the essences around the world. And I'm just so happy to have you here. So thank you so much for making the time.
Great. Lovely. Looking forward to chatting to you again.
Me too. Me too. You're not long back from an international teaching tour. How did that go?
Well, we usually go mid-May to about mid-July or a bit longer, just to escape the winter. But we certainly escaped the winter here. Like we had 2 months, 8 weeks of over 33 degrees heat everywhere in Europe. So yeah, we talked a lot about mulla and heat stress and people overwhelmed by heat. And like during that time, we have distributors in other countries, and they'll organize workshops. So, there are some countries, Italy, Switzerland, Japan, where I'll teach every year, and some in Germany, some in UK, some places like the Czech Republic, Bulgaria, we might do every 2 years. So, it's nice catching up with all our friends who we don't see for 2 years, and we've yeah, so that was really good, and the workshops are always well attended, and there's a couple of new Bush Essence books which have come out in that time that people have written in Italian, and so that's nice to sort of see where it's going out and spreading. In fact, I celebrated my 70th birthday in had some we took a week off, went to Portugal. I really liked the food in Porto, which is the second biggest city there, and we went up the Jura River and some beautiful countryside. But we were in Porto, and we were just crossing a road, and this woman, a young girl, she's about 19, 20, she said, "Oh, look, I'd just like to thank you for the essence. It's really totally changed my life." And I've never taught a workshop in Portugal, so that was a real highlight of the trip. I mean, sometimes we'll have people where I go regularly coming up and saying that, but in a country where I've never taught before, it's nice to know that the essence are out there and having an impact with people. Yeah.
Wow. That's beautiful. And happy birthday.
Ah, thank you. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
What a great birthday gift to, yeah, get that feedback again and again, from this beautiful, unexpected nooks and crannies of
Yeah.
the planet.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really nice. I think the thing I've enjoyed the most when going overseas is people coming up in a workshop and saying they were going to kill themselves, they were really in deep despair, and someone gave them an essence and survived. But it's really nice. Any good feedback when people say, "Oh, look, it's really," you know. We had a woman came in the office the other day. In fact, I was walking down the street and she recognized me just in front of the office, and she said, "Oh, I did workshops with you, like 20 years ago, and then I rediscovered the essences 3 years ago, and her daughter is very depressed." And sort of, I was giving her emergency, and she totally changed. And she's this woman was in her 80s, and she said
Wow.
she had a friend that she's known since kindergarten, who's been she's had cancer diagnosis, and she was in a lot of pain, and again gave her the emergency and said, she's very close to dying now. In fact, she was there to get a bottle of transition to help her make an easy passing over. But she said she's been without pain in the last 12 months, and she's been using emergency essence. So that was, yeah, it's nice sometimes where people just randomly come up to you and have a chat and share, some of how the essences are impacting them or the people they're in touch with.
That's remarkable. Just beautiful, beautiful.
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, it always gives me a real boost, and yeah, makes me appreciate just like, oh, the essence are out there doing what they're supposed to be doing, and it's a good feeling. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Throughout your trip, did you have any interesting moments or any themes that you were observing popping up, either with the classes or in the collective?
Look, one thing that a number of people kept recommending was in Bosnia-Herzegovina, that there's a very special area there, and there's pyramids, and the water
Mm-hmm.
from that area is very high. Apparently, uh, Novak Djokovic has built a little house in that area in the valley there, and when he's playing tennis, he'll use the water from that he's drinking during his tennis matches.
Wow.
And so, sometimes when you hear about one particular area from a number of different sources, like, okay, that might be a nice area to go off to and explore. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that was something that was, yeah, particularly of interest this trip. Yeah.
Wow.
So next year we'll probably, schedule some time where we can go off and have a bit of a visit there. Yeah. Check it out. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I've heard a lot of fantastic things about the pyramids in Bosnia. So,
Yeah. And, you know, as well as the bush essences, we also have three ranges of spiritual remedies working at different levels. And the white light essences, and one of the other ones is light frequency essence, and they've been made in different locations around the world. And in meditations I've got information that I should go to this particular, well, this location best embody the quality of what that essence is all about. So went to Greenland to make the Antarctic essence, and the direction was, in Greenland, this is the embodies the best place to make the remedy of anywhere in the world for what those qualities are. So who knows? Maybe when you get directed to one place, when it might be a new remedy. I don't know. Yeah.
yeah, amazing. I love that you started talking about the spiritual essences because it's something I have wondered about and like the stories behind them. And I'm very keen to explore that with you today. How did this range come about?
I was teaching in Mexico City. In fact, it was the daughter of an ex-president there who was our distributor at the time, and so was teaching Mexico City, but also in a town, small city called Tabasco, where very famous for its sauce.
Mm-hmm.
And going just before I left that trip, there was an Australian woman. Her name's Kachina. I've never met her. We've had these conversations by phone, and she said, I'm getting a sense you should go and visit Palenque. And she had been there a couple of years earlier, and it was in the south of Mexico. And it wasn't too far from being in Tabasco, 4 or 5 hours to get there. And so I went there. And on that trip, my daughter, she was maybe about 7 at the time. And a few weeks earlier, before going on that trip, in the meditation I had, I'd seen Grace as a young woman on her wedding day, and she just grown into a really gorgeous person and she was so incredibly happy, and like I just had tears every time I thought about the days after, just seeing, your child develop into, such a wonderful person and being very happy. I'd been traveled to lots of nice places, and I usually had a rose quartz crystal with me. And when I got that meditation, I thought, I'm going to keep taking this rose quartz crystal with me. And on her wedding day, when you've something borrowed, something blue, I'll throw in something old, and that'll be this crystal, and it'll absorb some of the energies from all the nice places that it'll been on by the time she's an adult and getting married. Anyway, I went to Palenque, and which is an old Mayan ruins, and it was so tranquil and peaceful. And I was telling Grace as we are wandering around, "Isn't it wonderful? Can you feel the energy?" And she's rolling her eyes as a 7-year-old, like weirdo, my dad. And anyway, I'd been there for a couple of days, and I was doing a little meditation in a quiet little building. And the message came through that I had to leave the rose quartz crystal there in Palenque. And my first reaction was, no way.
Oh.
you know, this has got a very set purpose, what this crystal is going to do. And yet, no matter how much you kick and scream, deep down, like it's not going to be very much point, because when you're getting such a strong message, like you've really got to follow it. And so I pulled out a bit of an old brick at the base of inside the building and put the rose quartz crystal there and shoved it back, thinking, well, it's got to stay in Palenque. No one's going to find it. No one will ever find it in there. And a couple of days later, I got the message that I was to come leave the crystal there in Palenque for at least a year, come back, and it would absorb the energy of Palenque, and I was to make a remedy from it. I was like, oh, okay, that sounds a bit better. So about 18 months later, I went back to Palenque, very nervous about going. I thought, what was the crystal's not there? And so I took
Mm.
that 2 days to build up the nerve to go. And I pulled the brick out and I'm putting my hand there. I can't feel anything. I'm getting really agitated. And the message, relax, it's here, just slow down. And then found the crystal. And normally making a flower essence, you've got a bowl of water, you're outdoors in the sun, flowers are picked under ideal conditions, and you're putting the flower in there. And the sun's releasing the healing energy of the flower into the water. In Australia, it takes about 2 hours for that process. And then the flowers release the energy in the bowl, the flowers are removed, and that water is the concentrate, and it's added to brandy and becomes what we call the mother tincture, and then it's diluted down a number of times. And then the final thing is people take liquid drops. But this time it was the crystal going in the bowl. And they told me it wasn't so much a Palenque essence, but it was a higher self essence, and that the test had been whether I'd listened to that message from my higher self. And the fact I had now was opening up this pathway, and that there'd be other essences made around the world which would be part of this series. And the one in Palenque, the higher self, was the very first in that sequence of being made. And I
Ah.
think for each the information came in meditations over the next 4 years, where I had to go and a little bit of information. But then when I'm making the remedy, I'm also a bit of a download of what quality the essence has as well. And the message was that that first one with the rose quartz crystal was more for my benefit, a little stepping stone, because the other essences, there's nothing physically placed in the bowls. It's just the bowls are left out, and I'm told how to bring through the energy and direct it into the bowls. But the first one had something physical in it, which was the rose quartz crystal. And so it was like a little stepping stone for me after I was used to putting flowers in there, that they gave me something physical. But from then on, it was just like for me to channel through the energy into the bowls. So yeah,
Mm.
and so that was the first of what we call the white light essences. And there's 7 remedies. There's an earth, air, fire, water. There's the higher self, a Davic essence, and an angelic one. And there's 8 different locations. The water essence was made from both a site in the southern hemisphere, one the northern hemisphere. And the southern hemisphere was Heron Island, which is in the lower part or the southern part of the Great Barrier Reef. And I was told that they need to be islands. The northern hemisphere one was Iona, which is off the west coast of Scotland. So with Heron Island, I went at low tide, and there's this beautiful coral reef you can just walk out to. And I put the bowls on top of the coral, had the water. And by the time the essence was completed, the tide had come in. So you're looking out about 100 meters, and there's this bowl, looks like it's floating on water. And that was the Heron Island one. And then I'd been to Iona previously, and a lot of friends who lived in the northern hemisphere, they'd always talked in wonderful terms about Iona, that it was, saying the veil is very thin there. And I'd been there in June, where you got those, it's midnight and it's still light outside in that part of the world. and it's not very big. It's like 8 kilometers long and about three across. So it's a quite a small one. So again, both being islands, but being very different. You've got a tropical island, and then you've got something, in the Atlantic Ocean, which is very
Mm.
different. And in fact, when I was going to Iona, I'd been teaching in Edinburgh, and you have to catch a train. There's two different ferries, and there was a big storm. And I was told that the ferries had been cancelled and they weren't expecting them to open for, about a week because of the seas being too rough. And I thought, well, I don't have a week, allowed a day to get there, a day to find it, and a day to make it. So I thought, well, I'll go there. And, there was closed for one day, but then the ferries opened up and they were, the captains on the ferry said, we're really surprised how quickly it settled down. I'm going, I'm so glad it did. I don't know what's going on here, but this is a perfect opportunity to make the essence. And yeah, made the essences. And there's always that little bit of magic, whether it's a bush essence or a spiritual remedy of how things flow, that, the essences get completed. So
Yeah.
that was the very first one. And so there was the water essence. The earth was made in caves in India, but they're very near the Tibetan border. And again, it had been caves I'd been to before. I'd been there maybe 4 years earlier. And was traveling with a group of friends whose sole purpose was to go there. So these caves had been written about in the Indian scriptures 3,000 years earlier. And the story was that there was a particular Indian king, and he was with a hunting party and his four sons, and he got separated from them. And after a day of riding, he came to the opening of the cave, and in front of it was Sesnag, which is the Hindu deity in the form of a cobra. And because he was royalty, Shesnag said, come on my back and I'll take you down into the caves. And the caves are probably about the size of a football field, maybe a little bigger, and they're divided into different sections. And when the king went down, all the Hindu deities were there doing their prayers and what have you. And, he stayed there for a week. At the end of the week, they said, well, it's time for you to go. And if you ride off in this direction, you'll meet up with the hunting party. However, you can't tell anyone of what you've experienced in the time that you've been here. So, he accepts that, rides off. And you can imagine, he's been gone for 10 days. They're beside themselves when, the family and his entourage find him. And of course, the first question is, where have you been? What's been happening? And he says, no, I can't tell you. And they keep badgering him. And after 6 months, he relents and tells them about what happened, and he dies instantly. And at that point, it said that the caves were closed off. But inside, there's natural rock formations of all the stories from the scriptures. And there's Vishnu with the story with all his hair. There was a bit like the Noah story in the Christian tradition, that there was huge deluge of water. It looked like the earth was going to be washed away. So Vishnu allowed the rains to fall on his hair, then gently come to the earth. There was the story too of Ganesh. He was guarding his mother, who was taking a bath, and it was in the evening. And Shiva, who was Ganesh's father, but also the husband of Ganesh's mum, he thought it was just some random person coming in and forbade him to go in because his mum was bathing. And Shiva was outraged that, someone would stop him as a god coming in. He chopped off Ganesh's head and then went in. And then the story unfolded. There was Ganesh who was guarding his mum. So he went to an elephant, cut off an elephant's head, and used the water from an eight-petaled locust to put Ganesh's body connected to the Indian head. And inside there's the beautiful eight-petaled lotus, and there's, amazing stories. If you go there, the head priest will go down with you and he will point out the rocks, talk about the stories of the scriptures. And the caves were said they were going to be closed for 3,000 years and a soldier would open them up. And there was a Sai Baba devotee. He was also a lieutenant colonel in the Indian Army. And he had a dream where Sai Baba took him into the cave complex. And he didn't think so much about the caves, but he was so happy that his guru he was in a dream with him. And he was in charge of the Indian army on the Tibetan border, which is a very delicate place because there have been skirmishes between the Chinese and the Indian armies for a number of years. So he was doing a tour of inspection and he came to the village where the caves were. And the head priest took him down and he realized this was the caves he'd seen in the dream. So he organized for Indian army engineers to come and light up the caves. And he was the soldier that had been written about for 3,000 years, would be closed and then would be opened up again.
Wow.
And shortly after that, he was so moved by experience, he left the army, and he started taking, it was mainly Sai Baba connected people on tours there. So you would fly into Delhi, you would travel to Rishikesh, where the Beatles went to with the were doing their yoga one with the Maharishi. And from there, it's a 2-day drive to get where the caves are. It's not that far, but you're going round and round the mountains in the Himalayas. And a lot of them are pretty hairy, they're hairpin bends, and you hope a car's not coming the other way. And you look down, there's deep slopes, and there's burnt out cars and buses down the bottom. So the first time I went there, it was 96, and there was about 15 people from Australia. I knew some of the people who were going, and the main thing was to go to visit the caves. And there was legends developing, such as if you went in there, you'd get your full 12 strands of DNA and you'd clear, I think, 21 generations of family karma. So there was a lot of stories going on. It was the lieutenant colonel who we went with on the trip. And there was about another 20 Indian people there. And, had an amazing time in there. And then, I did get the message that to make the earth essence had to go back to those caves. And on that trip, I got very badly sick and, nearly died. So I was thinking, oh, I'm not sure if I really want to go to back to the caves. And I suggested that Jenolan Caves, just about a couple of hours from Sydney, were very nice caves, and maybe we should make it there. But they weren't having any of that, so I was off to the caves. And I think I might have mentioned, Sarah, just in that first interview we did, that I was at university doing a science degree, went traveling to India in the holidays, got really sick, and that's what led me to working with herbs and naturopathy, yoga, and meditation. So, you know, 2 times there, both very ill, and so not keen to go there the third time. But okay, I said, if you send me there, make sure you look after me. And and I wasn't sure how it would go because there'd been 2 young German backpackers just before I went there the first time, and they dropped some LSD and they totally flipped out in the cave. And up until then, the head priest would allow people to go in individually. But after that experience, he said, I have to go down and, supervise you or to go with you. And when I'm making the essence, where it's a bush essence or the spiritual ones, I'm told not to have other people around because their thoughts can interfere with the essence making. And I had no way of contacting the head priest. So here I'm going to tell him, I want to make an essence. I hope he's going to let me, but then he wants to be around. How am I going to deal with this? So fortunately, he remembered me from when I'd been there the years earlier. I explained everything and he was very happy. And we were going to make the essence on the full moon. I'd planned the trip to make it there. So everything was arranged. And the man who had the key to the generator to sort of help light it up, we are going to do it 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He couldn't be found. He didn't turn up. And they're sending people all around the village trying to find him and no luck. And so it was arranged we'd do it the next day. And I was, a bit upset. I thought, oh, perfectly timed. And there was a small little cave that night I went into and was meditating, and the message came back, it's perfect timing. It's an earth essence. It's better to make it when the moon is waning, when the energy is going back into the earth. Everything is perfect. Just relax. And it's like, they know much more than me. I'm not, I'm merely the guy doing the traveling and touring, whatever. So next day we went down there. And I've also got brandy, and it's a dry state. So, I explained it was preservative, and that was okay. I had a leather bag carrying everything, and, wasn't sure if leather would be okay because of sacred cows. That was okay. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do? Making the essence. I found the location, but I can't really make it. He's there. And then once he knew where I wanted to be, he said, okay, I'm going to leave you, you thing, and then you come back up when you're finished. And I was like, oh, perfect. Everything's working really well. Except later the message was had to stay out overnight. So I came back up and I said, look, it has to stay overnight. And he said, don't worry, I'll make sure no one goes down until you go down in the morning. And so, things like that have unfolded. And I did get a little bit sick in India that trip, but we did make a lot of the essence. So I'll look for an apprentice to sort of go in and make it the next time around. So, stories like that. I mean, I made the air essence in the Austrian Alps, and
Mm.
it was a bit of a knife edge mountain, had to sort of go along. I was going on all fours. And I thought, well, no other person's going to be along here. And the fire essence was made in Catajuta. The Davic essence was made in Glastonbury in the Chalice Well Gardens. And the angelic one was made in a mountain called Putakusi. So Putakusi was the very center of two concentric rings of mountains in Peru. Now, a lot of people are familiar with Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu is on one of the inner rings of mountains, but Putakusi was an astronomical site for the Incas. They had their peak around about the 1400s, and then the Spanish came and they disappeared pretty quickly. But they destroyed the road leading up to Machu Picchu, and it was the only Incan ruin the Spanish never found. And then there was an American in 1911 who got taken there by the locals and realized the significance. And of course, then it's been opened up. But to get up Putakusi, there's these wooden ladders which go straight up the mountain. And, I was there in the wet season, and you climb up. I look like Quasimodo, the hunchback from Notre Dame, because I've got bowls, brandy, water on backpacks, and I've got this pouch poncho over the top of them. So the worrying thing is if you lean back too far, you can tipple over, and it's just like a straight high fall. And the other thing that some of the rungs you grab them and they were breaking because they were wet. So like I think that was one time I thought I might die in my life. Once was body surfing off Byron Bay, and this huge white pointer was about 30 meters past me, went heading off to sea, this huge dorsal fin. They're the two times I thought I've come close to maybe leaving the planet. And I told myself I just have to not look down, don't look up, just look straight ahead and just do one rung at a time. And then when I got the top making the essence, I did a meditation. I did it for half an hour. It was 2 hours. I just got totally lost. So it meant coming back down, it was in the dark. It was dusk and then it was dark coming down. So
Gosh.
I'd had a guide with me, a local guide in that time in the Andes. And he was like this mountain goat. And there's these narrow trails, and I'm going across like that, my back against the mountain, and he's like skipping along. And then when I told him I was going to go up Putakusi, the first thing he said was, "I'm not going." I'm going, it's not a good sign. Anyway, coming back down, it was dark, and there's a long trail to sort of get back to the road, and I didn't want to fall and drop it, so I'm on my hands and knees, but up back to front, so my belly's facing up the sky, and I've got all the backpack with all the essences there. I didn't want to have to go back up if something fell and it broke the bottles. And I've been, going for about an hour and a half. A couple of times I've been lost, and then fireflies would appear, and I'd see, where the trail was. It wasn't a very clear trail. And then I saw a flashlight after about 2 hours, and I thought, my first reaction is they're robbers. They're going to try and steal my mother tincture, which is a bit bizarre. So I didn't say anything, and then I heard him calling out my name, and it was my guide. He said, I saw you on the top of Putakusi, but when you didn't come home back to where we were staying, he said, I better go and have a look for you. And so I was very grateful because we had
Bless
a
him.
torch we could see, and he could carry some of the things. And I said to him, if you hadn't have found me, would you have gone up Putakusi to look for me? And he said, very glad I found you. So that was the final one of the white light, and that was the angelic essence. And for the Incas, they believe in the top of the mountains is where the angels, what they call Apu, reside. So that was part of the reason having to go on top of the mountain. And you don't get many people on the top of Putakusi either. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What was the energy like up there?
Oh, it was so amazing. And then it'd been rain, there were double rainbows when I was there. And I said, meditating, I thought I'd meditate for half an hour. And it was like, over 2 hours. It was just like this off you shoot. A bit like Iona. Again, like you meditate there, you seem to shoot off. So yeah, they're very clear, like really high energy locations where they want the essences made. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. And what kind of applications have you seen these essences have for people?
Okay. So the recommendation was that you would do water first before you do
Right.
any of the other six remedies. And the reason was it helps to clear um, some karmic patterns, and also dissolves a lot of really deeply buried emotions. So if you do that first, by clearing those two things, the other essences can work a little bit deeper.
Uh-huh.
And when I first made them, I thought, oh, this is great. We can do like a bush essence workshop over the 2 days, and maybe on the Monday we can do a white light essence workshop. And I did the first two. One was in New York, and then I went across to Ireland to do it. And so in the workshop, I talk about the remedy, show slides of the location, talk about its qualities, and then everyone's given the essence, a dose strength of it, and we, as a group, we meditate together. And meditation is great when you're doing it yourself, but when you're in a group, it's a different dynamic and allows people to, you've got your guides, but everyone else's spiritual guides, plus the, spiritual being is connected to the essences and just hovering around. So you can really go very deep. And I can still remember the Irish people leaving at the end of the day after doing seven really deep meditations in the one day, all about 20 minutes each, just like glazed eyes. And I thought, we better do it over 2 days from then on. And, very deep experiences. For example, there was, and the nice thing for that Irish one, we had half English and half Irish. About half the people had come across from England to do the workshop because it was the very first time. And that felt a bit of healing as well because English haven't done a lot of
Mm,
really they've done a lot of really bad things in Ireland, and the
yeah.
Irish remember. Um, and I think in the meditation for water, we'd only been going for about 10 minutes, and suddenly there was this blood-curdling scream. And everyone's like meditating, but like trying to peek their eyes open to see if someone's been murdered. And at the end of the meditation, the woman who did the screaming, and she'd done workshops with me before, so I knew her. And the thing that struck me, she looked about 10 years younger. She would have been about 60 at the workshop, but she looked like, like 10 years younger at the end of the meditation. And she said that she had been one of twins, but her twin didn't survive. And that's
Oh.
pretty common that in the womb there's can be other siblings that don't really make it very long. But she was deep in water and she could see these two hands, like, well, four hands just waving at her. And it was the twin that didn't die, but she realized there'd been triplets. And
Oh.
she'd always had this deep grief and sadness. And one of the deepest acting of the bush essences is the Sturt Desert Pea, which is about grief and sadness. Really powerful, deep acting remedy. And she'd taken that a number of times, and she said she had a lot of sadness come up, but there was still something very deep down that hadn't been touched. And she said
Mm.
that she never liked being alone. She always, liked having people around her. And from that meditation, she really got a sense of, that loss of the twin. She always wanted company around her, or the other two beings. So that was, yeah, that was the very first one. And the water essence can go down to really deep, blocked off, like trauma that we've just really shut down because it's been too traumatic, and gently open it up. In fact, that woman's name was Barbara. She did repeated the white light essence workshop maybe 6 years later. And in that workshop, she saw her father and who had long passed over. And the father said to him, they're all doing very well. And she said, the other two are doing very well. And she apparently had miscarried quite late in the pregnancy and lost, and that she had twins and she lost them. But it was nice confirmation that they were okay. But she was also aware that was talking about the other two had been in the womb with her when she was a child. And
Mm.
so that was just a nice completion again with the water essence um, doing that. So, that's examples, I think, that, water, very deep acting. In fact, we've had people who've come to the workshop and said, I wasn't going to come to this workshop. I've had friends who've taken the water essence and all they do is cry for weeks. They're on it. And I didn't want to go down that path. I didn't want to be crying for so long. So that's a thing with the water. And then we often follow that earth finishes, is a nice one to take after water. It's like water dissolves and earth restructures.
Uh-huh.
And we had an Irish psychiatrist who was very, as the Irish would say, very fey, very, very psychic. And she said, I can feel my cells. They've changed from being on the earth essence. And in the workshop, in the meditations, everyone is quite different. With earth, a lot of people sit up straight. We had one woman who was going to have back surgery a couple of weeks after the thing, and she brought like a little stretcher to lie down because she couldn't sit for very long. She'd been in a car accident. They're going to put metal rods down the spine. And
Wow.
she said, "Oh, my back, I'm not in pain." She actually cancelled the surgery, and
Wow.
contacted me a number of months later saying, "No, my back's fine." Now, we wouldn't necessarily prescribe it for someone needing back surgery, but just how that restructuring and organizing. We had one woman did the workshop in Adelaide, and she asked about giving her dad the earth essence just straight, not with water first, because he had dementia. And so I said, yeah, if you feel really drawn, do it. So she went to go for an outing with her mum, and her dad was there. And his dad hadn't been out of the house, like he'd been twice in the last 5 years. His
Mm.
sister had died, went to the funeral, and one other family gathering. Anyway, she said he's like a little bird. When I come in, I've got an essence from him. He just opens his mouth and he's used to me giving him essence. I gave him the earth essence. And she was ready to go with the mum. And then the dad's coming along and said, I'd like to go too. And, like he went out with them and seemed to have a nice time. And when they came back having a cup of tea after the trip, he was asking a few questions about the trip. And so she was really surprised. And the next day, she was meeting her mum in the city. They were going to the art gallery, and she had her children about 8 and 10 with her. And the mum got off the bus where, the daughter was going to meet the mum. And then getting off the bus was the dad.
Oh,
And so after the earth essence, he became more more grounded, more aware of what was going and more interested in wanting to interact a little bit more. So different stories like that. There's, we share case histories. So we released them in 2002. So, 24 years we've been teaching the workshops, getting lots of case histories which we share. And the fire essence, you need the water first, but also sound to help activate it. And
uh-huh.
one of the things for fire is getting a sense, why did you start this series of incarnations on the planet? Most of us aren't really from Earth. So where we've come, well, why do we start not just this lifetime, but the whole series of lifetimes here? And fire helps really get you in touch with this really deep inner core aspect of yourself, but you need sound. And I was told that, well, there'd been a system of numerology I'd studied where it was very complicated because it also took in where you were born, which no other system of numerology I've ever come across has done that. And you work out your number, which corresponds to a color, and there's 8 colors. The red to purple of the color spectrum, but also white. And for each of the 8 colors, there's a piece of music. So if you were to hear your piece of music, it's like having the bush essence crow. It has a balancing effect on you. So when you're taking the fire essence, we suggest that you are playing those 8 pieces of music because one of them will be the one that relates to you. And my wife, Jane, she just retired last year, but for 30 years she was the principal harpist at the opera in Sydney. So we got Jane and the concert master of the Sydney Symphony to record those 8 pieces of music, and we call it the White Lights CD. So when people buy the 7 remedies which come in a pyramid pack, there's also the CD that they can play when they're taking the fire. And a lot of practitioners will have it playing in the waiting room because it has a very calming effect. We'll find that children not wanting to go to sleep at night go down to bed. They play the white light CD, they're more happy to go to bed and they don't wake up grumpy and tired the next morning. And in fact, there was a woman in the country, she was playing the white light CD and was in the kitchen and looked out the window and there were 2 whip snakes there. And when the CD finished, they left. Sure, oh, that's interesting. And about 5 days later, again in the kitchen, doing washing up, put the CD on, looked out the window. This time there were 4 whip snakes, which are not poisonous. And when the CD finished, they just all slithered away. And again, 2 weeks later, played it, and there were snakes out there. So we had one woman doing a retreat, and they were given sprouts, wheatgrass, so I think it was at the time, to grow as part of your, detox. And she was playing the white light CD, and her wheatgrass grew twice as quick as everyone else's. So, it's good healing quality in that. And with the earth, air, fire, water ones, it connects you to that element. Also, there's a nature spirit connected to each of the elements. Like for earth, it's the gnomes. So a lot of people, when they're working with the earth essence, they'll have dreams or meditations, they're connecting with gnomes. Then you've got the sylphs for the air. And in the meditations, quite often people having strong connections, or if it's sylphs, they might be flying in the meditation, for example. And air just allows you to go out on that much higher vista where you can travel quite deeply in your spiritual practice, but it make sure you stay humble. You don't get conceited. Well, I had this amazing experience, or I'm opening up all these spiritual gifts and what have you. And in fact, one woman described it as the Mary Poppins essence because Mary Poppins was someone who expected miracles, stayed humble, was very loving, not criticizing people, but very firm. And that's what like the air essence is doing. So each essence is really doing very different emotional and spiritual qualities. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's so fascinating to hear how they've been distilled into the elements and then what happens therapeutically as you journey through them.
Yeah. And for air, it can help you stay very detached if you're caught up with a lot of emotional dramas, like takes you up and you can see both sides of a situation and see outcomes without getting emotionally caught in there. And it's almost like the emergency essence of the white light. It's like trusting everything's going to be okay. Let go, let God, that type of sense with there. Whereas the Davic essence in Glastonbury, it's very much if people when they're very stressed, not emotionally caught up, but just like so much going on, I'm just overwhelmed. There's too many things to do. Like there's a woman in Germany and her ex-husband, and they stayed very close. Well, they're still married, but from financial reasons, he got very drunk and fell down an escalator, and like he's got irreparable brain damage. And the amount of paperwork in Germany that she's got to do, and she's not very well herself, of just, the bureaucracy making decisions of where he's going to go, who's going to look after him, and setting up all the financial things. And that type of stress is the Davy
Mm.
Essence one of just helping you to chill, relax, don't get too stressed by things, for example. And, so there's lots of different qualities. The Davic essence is to help, realize we're a spiritual being in a physical body and like not lose sight of that spiritual essence of who we are, for example.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
So, and the big difference between the spirituals and the essences is you don't mix the spiritual remedies together, you take them singularly. Whereas, if I mentioned emergency essence, is made up of 7 different bush flowers, all combined together in the one bottle. So, you wouldn't mix Antarctic and Arctic together, or you wouldn't mix fire and water, get a bit of steam. Like you would take water first, and then you might do a bush essence, or after that, you might do another spiritual remedy. So there's a little bit of difference as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting and important to know about the aligned ways to take them.
Yeah.
I'm very curious to know about all the other spiritual remedies, but I'm aware that that may be a conversation for another day as I look at the time.
Yes, I'm amazed. I've been yakking away, not even letting anyone ask anything. Sort of my apologies for.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect
Yeah,
because it's so fascinating to really hear what the stories are and the guidance that came to you and how these beautiful essences unfolded and the ways to use them is fantastic.
great. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, well, we'll have to do maybe something, a follow up at some point and cover some of the other ones, what the other two ranges of spiritual remedies. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to do that. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing again just your incredible and humble wisdom with us. I really appreciate it. And it's just so amazing to see the incredible work that the Australian bushflower essences, the spiritual essences do for people, for communities, and the ripple effects that that has. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, likewise.